Trackers turning 250, and it's time to rock out with our forefathers. American-made, battle-ready style for true patriots. Whether you're marching in the parade, grilling in the backyard, or raising a toast to liberty, do it in the gear that screams freedom. Celebrate 250 years of USA in style. Wear your American pride loud. Trendjackers.etsy.com. Grab yours before the fireworks.
From Governor's Comedy Club in Levittown, this is Sportsbash presented by TicketBash.com. TicketBash.com, where memories are made affordable and where you'll never pay a service fee. Get the best seats at the best prices at TicketBash.com. Sportsbash is also presented by Ryan Anthony's Heating and Air Conditioning Service, keeping Long Island warm for over 18 years, serving their customers in Nassau and Suffolk with pride, honesty, and integrity. For more information, visit www.liboilers.com. Well, hi again, everyone, and welcome to Sports Bash. I'm Peter Schwartz. 516-465-3990 is the number to call. Make sure you are subscribing to Govs Comedy Club podcast channel on YouTube and Facebook, and follow Sports Bash Media on X, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also listen to the show on Apple Music, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. We got a great show for you today. We're going to talk some hockey with EJ Raddick from NHL Network. He's going to join us in around 20 minutes. We'll talk about the Olympics, and it's been a really good Olympics so far for both the USA men's and women's hockey teams. We'll talk to EJ about that and also about the resumption of the NHL season. Now, it's interesting. The NHL season does not resume until next week, but starting today at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, an hour from now, NHL teams, minus the players that are away for the Olympics, are allowed to resume practicing. So actually, as we do this show live at 1 o'clock on this Tuesday, an hour from now, the Islanders are going to be on the ice at Northwell Health Ice Center in East Meadow to resume their practice, of course, minus two players, Bo Horvat and Andre Palat. So the Islanders back on the ice today, as well as all the other NHL teams without the players that they are losing for the Olympics. But again, Sunday is the gold medal game for the men, so everybody will be home after that, and then the NHL season resumes during the middle of next week. Later on in the show, and this is an appropriate guest as we get ready for the baseball season, Larry Schechter wrote this book called The History of Fantasy Sports, and he is going to join us on the show at around 1:40 to talk about his book, and it's a perfect time to talk to somebody with fantasy sports because I would argue probably the two most popular fantasy sports as far as participation would be baseball and football, and we just completed the NFL season, and I think for baseball it goes back so much longer in history, and Tony Walker, my producer and the host of the Knock 'em Dead comedy show, 11 to 12:30 every weekday. Tony, do you go back far enough to remember Stratomatic baseball? I think that was probably the first incarnation of fantasy sports was Stratomatic baseball.
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah, it was the board game, and actually the funny part about that is the headquarters for Stratomatic baseball is here on Long Island.
Oh, that I didn't know.
And people line up every year outside, I believe it's in Williston Park. I think that's where it is. And people who are still to this day like fanatics of Stratomatic baseball, the day that the cards for the new year come out with the new statistics, because every year the cards in the game become obsolete from year to year because you need the updated statistics for the rolling of the dice and all that stuff. But people actually, and they come from far away. They take the Long Island Railroad train on that Oyster Bay line is right there, and people line up outside Stratomatic baseball, and they don't want to wait for it to be mailed to them. They show up, and they get the brand new cards for the games every single year. So, but obviously fantasy sports has evolved into the monster that it is now, and we'll talk to Larry about that. To be truthful, I've never been a huge fantasy sports guy. My kids play fantasy sports, and here's why I'm not really that into it. There's only one fantasy I have in sports, just one, and that's the Jets to win the Super Bowl, and we know that that's not going to happen anytime soon. So maybe I should play fantasy sports. Maybe Larry can talk me into it a little bit later on in the show. So we'll talk to Larry Schechter, who wrote The History of Fantasy Sports. We'll also have the Sports Bash Media poll question of the day, what's hot at ticketbash.com, and the Coach's Collectibles item of the week. And now it is time for the Sports Bash Flash. It's presented by the Marty Lyons Foundation, granting wishes for more than 43 years. For more information, please visit martylyonsfoundation.org. I just mentioned the Winter Olympics that we're going to talk about with EJ Raddick in just a little bit. The USA women's team advancing to the gold medal game, beating Sweden 5-0 in the semifinals yesterday. The USA, and this has to be, now I know the old Soviet Union men's hockey teams used to storm through the hockey competition. But ever since the landscape of Olympic hockey has changed, this has to be one of the most dominating performances we've ever seen in the Winter Olympics. The United States has outscored its opponents 31-1 in their 6 wins with no losses. They've had 5 straight shutouts. It's incredible how the women are rolling through it. And remember, one of those shutouts was a 5-0 beating of Canada, who they're going to play in the gold medal game. Excuse me. So this has been a dominating performance by the women for the United States at the Olympics, and they are now 1 win away from capturing the gold medal. And by the way, this is going to be the 7th time that the United States and Canada have met in the women's gold medal game at the Olympics. So we'll keep an eye on that. And by the way, and I was talking to Tony about this off the air before the show started, guess when that game is on Thursday? 1:10 p.m. Eastern Time. What time are we on the air? 1 o'clock Eastern Time. So Tony has promised that he is going to pull out his toolbox. He's going to set up the satellite dish on top of the roof of Governor's Comedy Club, and we are going to have a special feed from Italy to be able to watch the first hour of the game while we're doing the show. Isn't that right, Tony?
Sure.
Okay, there you go. So Tony is going to be very busy over the next 2 days setting all this up so that we can watch the broadcast of the game on Thursday at 1 o'clock. At the very least, I'll subscribe to Peacock for a day and just watch it on my phone if that doesn't work out. But that's going to be on Thursday at 1 o'clock. The men's team is going to face the winner of the Sweden-Latvia qualification playoff game in the quarterfinals on Wednesday at 3:10, and we're probably headed towards a USA-Canada gold medal game for the men as well. In that case, I think it's going to be a little more difficult for the men to come away with the gold medal. This Canada team is very, very good. Like the United States team is no slouch, but that's going to be an interesting gold medal game if it's the USA and Canada in the gold medal game as well. None of the local sports teams were in action yesterday, none in action today. There was some interesting news from baseball this morning, and I don't know if anybody caught this a couple of hours ago. Tony Clark, former Met, former Yankee, and the executive director of the Major League Baseball Players Association, announced his resignation this morning. Now, keep this in mind. After this season, this coming December, the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners is expired. And we've talked about this on the show, and it's been talked about ad nauseum. There's probably going to be a lockout. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that, barring some kind of miracle, there's going to be a work stoppage. And I would suffice it to say, and I hate saying this, but I've said it before, I think we have a very good chance of having no baseball season next year. It's just that bad of a situation. The owners want a cap, the players do not, and I think that's going to be obviously the biggest stumbling block. Now, I don't know how much of a wrench this throws into it with Tony Clark resigning, because now the union has to get a new executive director in place to negotiate with Rob Manfred. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know if this came out of nowhere to the Players Association, or they saw this coming and they have somebody ready to go, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. But it's not looking good. This was an interesting question. I'm going to bring this up really, really quick because we got to get on to some other stuff. My co-worker at WFAN, Chris McMonagle, who a dear friend of mine, and he does a great job now with Carton in the afternoon. This came up in conversation yesterday, and he said this, because the question was brought up, would you give up a guaranteed championship for your team this year if you knew that there was baseball next year? And like myself, Chris McMonagle is a huge Yankees fan, and that would be the question. And I'll pose it to Tony as well, who's our resident Met fan. If you were guaranteed, Tony, a Met World Championship in 2026, but there's no baseball in 2027, would you reverse it? Would you give up the guaranteed World Championship this year to ensure that we've got labor peace the year after?
I think I would.
You think you would?
I think I would.
It's an interesting question, right?
It is a very interesting question.
Now, I see here's, again, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way, because sometimes I open up my mouth and things come out wrong. I don't want this to come out the wrong way. In my life, I've been very, very fortunate. I've seen the Yankees win 7 World Series in my life. I would give that up too.
You would?
I would give it up too. Yeah, well, because it's not like I've been waiting like my whole life to see it. Now, if it was football, and you told me I had a Jets World Championship, well, then I could die in peace if the Jets won a Super Bowl. But yes, I would give up the Yankees winning the World Series this year if you told me that there was labor peace the year after. But I'm glad we're in concert on that, because sometimes when I bring up these goofy questions where we disagree sometimes on there. But yeah, so it's an interesting question, but it sounds like we're headed towards labor unrest in Major League Baseball. And that's where we stand. That's the Sports Bash Flash presented by the Marty Lyons Foundation. There's so many different ways we could have opened up the show today with regards to a monologue. And I just felt like this would be the way to do it based on what we heard from Port St. Lucie yesterday. If Sports Bash Media was going to name a captain of Sports Bash, and Vinny Tickets is the CEO of Ticket Bash, the primary partner on Sports Bash Media. So if you asked Vinny Tickets to name a captain of Sports Bash, who do you think he would name? Who do you think is the captain of Sports Bash? Tony?
You.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Again. So we're doing great today so far. This has been phenomenal. Now, again, some people, like I know Glenn from Flushing is a huge fan of Tony. So if Vinny came out and said Peter Schwartz is the captain of Sportsbash, it's the right move to do. I think everybody agrees. However, there might be some people in the Tony camp that might get offended by that because really without Tony, there's no show. Tony runs the board. Tony does all the scheduling. He unlocks and locks the door when he doesn't want people in here. Like, we don't get to do Sportsbash without Tony. But yes, at the end of the day, the captain of Sportsbash is me. And this brings up the question that was brought up to Mets owner Steve Cohen yesterday. And I don't know exactly how the question was broached, but of course, going back to last year, there has been this expectation that at some point, Francisco Lindor was going to be named the captain of the Mets. Now, it seems like he wants to be the captain. Not every player wants to have that title of captain. Some players just like to lead by example. And the best of the best in teams have players up and down the lineup that are leaders. You don't necessarily have to be the captain to be a good leader. I think we've seen that on great team after great team. You have the like Derek Jeter was the Yankee captain. He was named the Yankee captain after the first part of that dynasty, and then he was the captain of the 2009 Yankees. But he wasn't named captain until after they won in 96, 98, 99, 2000. But that Yankee team that won those four didn't have a captain, but they had leaders up and down that lineup, right? So they didn't need a captain, but Derek Jeter eventually was named the captain. Steve Cohen, the Mets owner, yesterday said that as long as he owns the team, the Mets will not have a captain. And I think this caught a lot of people by surprise because, again, we've been hearing that Francisco Lindor would eventually be named the Mets captain. And I don't know how Met fans feel about this. I'm going to get Tony's thought on it in just a second. But here's what I think the issue is here. Here, again, you talk about hot takes, right? And I've been thinking about this since I heard the news yesterday. I think Steve Cohen internally felt a little issue with naming Lindor the captain. Here's what I think happened. I think if you polled the locker room, the clubhouse, I think everybody in that clubhouse would want Francisco Lindor to be the Mets captain. I think if you polled Met fans, I think they would all say Francisco Lindor should be the captain of the New York Mets. But Steve Cohen says he will not have a captain as long as he owns the team. Here's why I think he's doing this. I think Steve Cohen will not name Francisco Lindor the captain of the Mets because he doesn't want to insult Juan Soto. Because you just signed Juan Soto last year to this huge contract, 15 years, $1 gazillion. And to a lot of people, he looks like the face of the Mets organization right now. But Francisco Lindor is looked at as the undisputed leader of the Mets, especially with Pete Alonso no longer on the team. Everyone looks at Francisco Lindor as the leader of the Mets. He should be the captain. And I think, again, I don't know this. I'm not an insider for the Mets. In my opinion, I think Steve Cohen is afraid to name Francisco Lindor the captain of the Mets because he's afraid of insulting his superstar player that he just signed to a 15-year contract. That's how I feel about it, because otherwise it makes no sense. Now, you could be in the camp where a team doesn't need a captain or shouldn't have a captain, and that's what Steve Cohen is saying. I don't believe Steve Cohen feels that way. I think he is legitimately afraid of hurting Juan Soto's feelings, and that's why he's not naming a captain. So, for the time being at least, unless Steve Cohen changes his mind from what he said, the Mets are not going to have a captain, at least in the 2026 season. And now I'll pose my thought to Tony Walker, who's the resident Met fan. First of all, were you surprised Steve Cohen said that yesterday? And number two, are you buying what I just said?
Number two, I do. Yes, I totally buy it. But I think it's sad. Number one, I was surprised by it, but not because I feel Lindor should be the captain, I was surprised because there's other things to worry about. Like you just said, the Yankees won 4 times before Jeter was named the captain. Can we talk about winning? Can we get some World Series wins before we? This is distraction. This is stupid. No matter who's named the captain on any team, whether they're captain or not, they're going to do the same things that they do.
Right.
They're going to lead the team. They're going to have a great attitude. Whether they have a C on their jersey or not, this should not be a topic of discussion right now for the Mets.
Yeah. I think it's a foolish thing to bring up. I think Steve Cohen could have diffused it by just saying, "Oh, we're still discussing it," or "That's up to the players." Like, I don't think he needed to come out and say, "As long as I'm the owner of the team, there won't be a captain." Well, at some point, I think fans might clamor for it, and I think it created a little bit of a buzz yesterday that he said it.
Agreed.
But I just think it was unnecessary, but I do think that's why he's not naming Lindor captain. Because maybe something got back to him. Maybe Soto's camp said, this is not looking good. Like, we have a 15-year commitment and all this money, and you're going to name Lindor the captain? So I think Steve Cohen got caught in the middle of this, and he's just said, I'm not naming a captain at all. Let us everybody lead by example. I think that's what happened. And that leads us to the Sports Bash Media poll question of the day. It's brought to you by the Embassy Diner, located at 4280 Hempstead Turnpike in Bethpage. Every customer is considered family at the Embassy Diner. Mention Sports Bash and get a free dessert with your meal. We post a new question every Tuesday and Thursday on the Sports Bash Media X/Twitter page. And here is the question that I just brought up, I just discussed, and we're going to throw it out to Met fans. Met fans, should the Mets have a captain? And you have 4 choices. No, 68% so far of the people since I posted this morning have said no. Yes, it should be Francisco Lindor. So far, that's got 18% of the vote. Yes, Juan Soto got 7% of the vote.
Wow.
Yes, but comment another player name below. Nobody has commented the name below, but 7% of the people, we go through this all the time. I put comment below and nobody ever comments below. 7%. So, yes, I think that Francisco Lindor should be the Mets captain. And again, I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm a Yankee fan, but I believe in having a captain on a team. I think it should be Francisco Lindor. Tony, where are you on this?
Mookie Wilson.
If Mookie Wilson ever came on the show and was in studio, I don't know. I think we'd have to bring in somebody else to run the board because I don't think Tony would be able to handle himself if that happened. Right?
No argument. No argument.
Jeez. Oh my God. No, seriously. Answer the question.
I'm gonna go with no.
You're gonna go with no?
No.
Okay. Yep. All right. So no is Tony's answer. Yeah, but most people now, 68%, have decided that it should be a no. Before we get to my first guest of the show, I did want to bring this up, and we're going to bypass the first break since our guest is on the line. But I want to make sure I didn't forget to get to this. Oscar-winning actor Robert Duvall passed away yesterday at the age of 95. He was in so many memorable movies. I mean, the list goes on and on. Godfather, Apocalypse Now. He was also in a very underrated movie that I really like called The Paper. Michael Keaton.
That movie.
That was a tremendous movie. Michael Keaton was in that movie. Glenn Close was in that movie as well. That was a terrific. If you haven't seen The Paper, try and find that on Netflix or wherever that might be. That's a great movie. But my favorite role that Robert Duvall played was the sports writer Max Mercy in The Natural, which is my favorite movie, also featuring, the late, Robert Redford. So in that movie, Max Mercy plays this really, it doesn't do well by sports writers in terms of perception and things like that. He really painted, his character painted sports writers in a very bad light, just the way his attitude and things like that. But he played that role magnificently in The Natural. Here is a memorable scene from the movie when Max Mercy walks up to Roy Hobbs in the locker room for a chat.
Still dogging me, huh, Max?
Yeah. End of the road, Hobbs.
Want to hear what I think our chances are?
So you read my mind.
That takes all of 3 seconds.
They come and they go, Hobbs. They come and they go. I'm gonna tell you something, I'm gonna be around here a lot longer than you or anybody else around here. I'm here to protect this game.
Whose game?
I do it by making or breaking the likes of you.
Did you ever play ball, Max?
No, never have. But I make it a little more fun to watch, you see. And after the day, whether you're a goat or a hero, you gotta make me a great story. Okay? See you around.
A great scene in the movie, The Natural. It was great because you read my mind, because that takes all 3 seconds. One of the classic lines in The Natural. But deepest condolences to the family of Robert Duvall, who passed away at the age of 95. We're going to bypass our first break because our guest has joined us, and we talked about the Olympics at the beginning of the show. It's been a great run by both the United States Olympic teams, the men and the women, and we're getting ready for the resumption of the NHL schedule next week. And I thought of no better person to come on and talk with us about the Olympic hockey tournament so far, as well as what's going to come the rest of the year in the NHL. We welcome in my good friend from NHL Network, EJ Raddick. EJ, it's Peter. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Peter. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. And obviously, anybody who roots for the United States Olympic hockey teams is doing great too. I want to start with the women, and they have been just remarkable. I just mentioned they're 6-0 in the tournament so far, going to the gold medal game against Canada. They've outscored their opponents 31-1 with 5 straight shutouts. Is this the most, aside from going back to the Soviet Union men's team of old, where they were so dominant in all of those Olympics except for 1980? But can you remember a more dominant Olympic performance than this?
It's pretty dominant. I remember that, in 2014, the Canadian men's team was really good. Now, they only beat the U.S. 1-0, and I think it was a semifinal or quarterfinal game. But Team USA didn't have really they didn't have many chances in the game. I mean, I just thought they were a really dominant group as well. It's been a great run. There's no question about it. They've infused a lot of young players into their group. I think in Canada, there's been a little bit of kind of backbiting among fans and observers that maybe they should have brought some more younger players as well. But Team USA has played very well. You mentioned it. I mean, that's a wide margin, outscoring your opponents, not allowing any goals. All that said, you got to finish the job.
Yeah.
And, they play Team Canada on Thursday. Team Canada gets Marie Poulin back. And so we'll see, how that goes. But Team USA has been dominant. And if they continue to play the way they have, they should win the gold medal. But they got to get it done on the ice.
You talk about a lot of the young players, but also still Kendall Coyne-Schofield and Hillary Knight doing their thing for the American team as well. It could be the last Olympics for both of those players, and that would be a wonderful way to go out for your Olympic career is to have the gold medal placed around your neck.
Yeah, one more for those two players, and I will tell you, Peter. Being at rinks all the time. I mean, I watched, my son played youth hockey over the last, he's still playing college club hockey now, but, being at rinks and to see the amount of young girls that play hockey now. I know there's been some statistics from USA Hockey talking about like 65% growth in the last, decade or so. Young girls have watched the women that have participated at the Olympics and watched the growth of women's hockey and, really want to kind of follow in their footsteps. And you're seeing it with so many really talented young players on this Olympic team now. So for years and years, it's been Canada and the U.S. as really the two teams, that play at the highest level of women's hockey. There was only one time in the Olympics that the two teams did not meet in the gold medal game. That was 2006 when the Swedes were able to find a way to beat the U.S. team in the I believe it was in the semifinal game. So, we'll see where it goes from here. But women's hockey in the United States is on a huge upswing, and you can see in the play, here at the elite level.
And no question, the PWHL is growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, and I know you know this, the New York Sirens, who play most of their home games at the Rock, the Prudential Center, the home of the Devils. They're going to play a game against Seattle at Madison Square Garden in April. Yep. And if it's not already sold out, I remember we had Casey O'Brien on the show last week, and I was looking at the Ticketmaster schematic of the ticketing, and there were only a handful of blue dots that were still on the list. That game's going to be a sellout. So there's going to be a women's hockey game being played at Madison Square Garden in April that's going to be played in front of 18,000 people, which is just remarkable.
Yeah, and let's face it, they'll get a bump from what's gone on at the Olympics, and they'll get a bump from a couple of the players I'm sure will be part of that. So, that's really good to see. And, they got another thing going for them. The Rangers have been terrible, and they're likely not in it. And so hockey fans, are looking for things to watch, and so that's another reason why people might be willing to go. So, a lot of things have come together for them.
Yes.
We'll see how it goes in early April.
We're talking to EJ Raddick from NHL Network. Let's flip over and talk with the men. It looks like we're heading towards a USA-Canada final in the men, although there's still some work to do for both teams. But the United States is through to the next round. Let's start with the United States team. What are your thoughts on what we've seen from them so far in the preliminary play?
Well, they've done what they had to do, which was to win their pool and to try to get the highest seed as possible. And they got the number 2 overall seed. Canada got the number 1 overall seed via goal differential. Canada's been outstanding, and I think Canada's team is built to kind of run up scores more. They have so many. I think the strength of their team is their forwards. I think the strength of the U.S. team is their defensemen. So Team USA has done what they were supposed to do. It has been a little bumpy. I guess when you have high expectations, people expect you to, blow out Denmark and Latvia and Germany. But those countries, they're prideful. They've got some good players on their particular teams, and they make it hard for you. And so Team USA, they had some struggles early in all those games, found ways to play well in the second period, get a lead, build on the lead, and end up winning the game. So they've done what they had to do, and now they sit here, they wait for the winner of the Sweden-Latvia game. Most likely will be Sweden. The earlier 3 knockout games today, the favorites won those games, setting up the quarterfinal matchups tomorrow. So I think Team USA, it's kind of an unfortunate way this is done. They've got to face Sweden in the quarterfinal because Sweden has got a really, really good roster. And, outside of Canada and the U.S., I would say they're the most dangerous team in the tournament. So that's going to be a tough assignment if indeed the Swedes do get it done against Latvia. The U.S. will be rested. The Swedes will have to play a second game inside 24 hours, so we'll see where it goes. But Team USA has done what they're supposed to do. And you're right. If the favorites hold up in this, we are aimed at a potential gold medal match between Canada and the U.S. on Sunday morning.
And we saw that in the Four Nations face-off last year, and that was an unbelievable tournament with those two teams playing and ultimately meeting in the final. And you would think we'd get a little bit of the same as far as the action and the physicality and the end-to-end action. I think there's so many people that are hoping for a USA-Canada final. I think it would be epic again, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're the 2 best teams in the tournament. Now, whether or not, they win in a single game, like Canada will play the Czechs tomorrow, that, if everything holds up, they would likely have to play the Finns and then, on to Team USA if the Americans win. So, at the end of the day, those are the favorites. The U.S. and Canada are the best rosters. Will they win a single game, elimination game against Sweden or against Finland on, either side? Right. We've seen this movie. We know how it goes in single game eliminations in hockey games. Strange things happen. And so we'll just have to watch and find out. But, clearly if those 2 teams get together, that'll be just so much fun to watch. And I think for the NHL and, people who want to grow the game, certainly in North America, that would be must-see TV on Sunday morning to see Team USA and Team Canada go for the gold.
You mentioned we've seen the movie. I grew up seeing it live, the 1980 team. So we had the first thing we had after the 1980 Olympic team was that horrible movie that was on ABC.
Yes,
Carl Malden. Yeah, Carl Malden played. Yeah. I had Ken Morrow on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we were laughing when we remembered that Carl Malden played Herb Brooks. And by the way, Herb Brooks was not happy about it. Kenny was telling me how upset that Herb Brooks was that he was portrayed by Carl Malden
Well,
in that movie.
hey, listen, the streets of San Francisco, that was a big show at that time. And that was Carl Malden's vehicle there with the young Michael Douglas. I mean, but at any rate, we had that. And you know what's funny is talking to Kenny Morrow about the portrayal of him in the movie Miracle.
Yes.
They portrayed him as a left shot, which he's not.
Right.
And so I had asked him about that, but the first thing he said was no beard. He was the only guy that had a beard, and he was very disappointed that the actor did not have a beard that played him. So, yeah, I mean, you get into these into movie depictions, it's a little interesting. And you're right. We've seen the movie. We've seen there's been a couple documentaries, including a new one that's out right now.
I was just going to add that that's where I was going with it, because Netflix just came out with. That's why we had Kenny on the show a couple of weeks ago, was to talk about the Netflix documentary, Miracle, the Boys of 80. Let me just first ask you, did you see it, and what did you think? I thought it was phenomenal.
I saw it, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, the only nitpick I'd have is that they didn't really mention the fact that the game was not on live. It was on tape delay. The Russia game was on a Friday night, and I think the game was played at 5 o'clock, and then the game was aired at. But like that's just a nitpick. I thought they did a lot of cool things. I thought putting the guys on the bench there in Lake Placid and watching some of the highlights and watching some of their family members, old video, I thought that stuff was terrific. And that's a timeless tale of David and Goliath kind of story. And I think there's always new fans and new people who haven't heard of it. I mean, it's been a long time now. I always have to preface it myself when I talk about it, depending on who I'm talking to, right? Because like you remember it, Peter, but there's so many, I mean, that, it was a long time ago now. You have to kind of give them the backstory.
Yeah, I remember I did not want to wait for ABC to show it. My first job out of college was at Sports Phone. I think you know that. But I used to call Sports Phone all the time. Yeah. And I had no patience to wait for 8 o'clock to watch the game live. And I was calling Sports Phone to get the scores. And I was like, Dad, the United States just beat the Russians. I can't believe it.
Well, I hope King Wally was on the scene for you.
That's right. And he, by the way, for those who don't know, King Wally is Mike Wilshevsky, who's the PA announcer for the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. Wow. On the subject of international hockey, and we're coming off of these Olympics now, and next year, the NHL All-Star Game is going to be at UBS Arena. The Islanders are going to host it. We don't know what the format of that game is going to be yet. We also know that the World Cup of Hockey is going to happen in 2028, and Bill Daly did an interview yesterday where he kind of outlined what that tournament might look like. From what you've heard, what will the World Cup of Hockey in 2028 look like in terms of participation, and do you think there's a chance we see Russia back in it?
Well, I mean, I would say the only chance of that is if the geopolitical sentiment in the world changes. I mean, we'll see. I wish the world would be a lot different these days than it is, and there's a lot of people suffering in Ukraine for what I think is really not a really good reason, but that's a deeper and longer conversation. It's unfortunate for the players that don't get to participate, but that's all part of life sometimes. Right. You've seen it over, you live long enough, you've seen these things play out before. I would also tell people, because I mean, people, listen, it's disappointing not to have a guy like Kucherov or some of these great players in the tournament, in the Olympics, but in the last 3 tournaments, best on best, when everybody was there, Team Russia did not win a medal. Not only did not win a gold medal, they did not win a medal. So it's not like, Canada's not there, a team that has won gold medals, or, Team USA has won a couple of silver medals over these last 4 or 5 best on best. So, hopefully that gets straightened out. We'll see. Hard to really say at this point. These things are way, way, way above my pay grade. But, I think it'll be a good tournament because, it'll for the NHL clubs and for growing hockey, I think the NHL has so much more control of it with the PA running it together. They can run it, obviously the owners get more out of it. They run it in the NHL rink, so they get to have home games and home dates, so to speak, for tournament. I like the idea of doing it in February. It's just like last year at the Four Nations. It's in the winter. It's hockey season. It's after the Super Bowl. There's that kind of hole in the sports calendar. I think hockey fits really nicely into that. Best on best hockey is great. And, this will be a little bit more limited, I would think, the World Cup, because I don't think you would have a 12-team field. I would think you'd have somewhere along the line of 8 countries for that. So
it sounded like what Bill Daly said. It sounded like the competition would take place outside of North America first to whittle the field down, and then like remaining teams would then come to North America. But
I think you probably end up with 8 here, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think that's what he said. Yeah,
because it would just be hard. I mean, the window is tough as it is to get all these things in, and but I think it's still a little bit of a work in progress. But I like the idea. I mean, the Olympics is kind of the Olympics, and everybody is drawn to the bigger picture of it. I personally think that a World Cup that the NHL and the NHLPA runs at that time of the year would do quite well. It's something from a financial standpoint, they could sell that package if they want to sell it to another entity, because I think that would be a real, you saw in Four Nations last year, that was a ratings winner for them.
Oh, it's tremendous.
And so that's another thing you could sell to someone. So these are all ways to help monetize, this event and create, more impact with fans, create more money for owners and players. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of always been a win-win. To have a World Cup in September, Peter, like they've done in the past, I just don't think it gets any traction because there's too many other things going on in sports.
Agreed.
Plus, it's the summer. Really, in September is still nice weather. People aren't thinking about hockey.
Right, and the baseball pennant races are heating up at that point.
Exactly.
So I wonder also, EJ, with the All-Star game coming to UBS Arena next year, I wonder if they continue giving us a little taste of the international competition. I would love to see the NHL go back to the North America versus the world, a regular hockey game. I've been on my soapbox about All-Star games. I don't know why people have to reinvent the wheel. All-Star games are what they are. But I think it would be a great spot for the NHL to go back to the traditional, 3 20-minute period game and go back to that format that they used some years ago where it was the North America against the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these formats, they come up with them. They're, the first year they do them, people kind of are curious about them, and then they eventually run their course. I mean, I think the NHL did the thing where they had the players pick the teams one year, a couple of years, and that was great. The first year it happened, the second year, but then after that it loses kind of its luster. I think that's just the nature of it. All-star games in sports where you have contact, physical contact. I mean, the NFL has done away with it, I guess, now. They just play flag football.
Yeah, they've given up on that.
I think it's really difficult to do. So I'm sure the league, I know over at the league office, they're always thinking about different ways to try it. What you're saying, that might be some route they go. I mean, maybe they create some kind of 3-on-3 format where you have different countries. You have Canada has a 3-on-3 team. The USA has a 3-on-3 team. Finland, Sweden. Maybe you do it that way. Who knows? But I think it's a really difficult thing to accomplish a game that is anything more than an exhibition.
Yeah.
And, I know as someone who's gone to a lot of All-Star games and a lot of All-Star weekends, they're for the fans. They're really for the young fans.
Yeah.
They're for the sponsors. If you're looking for a hockey game, you're really not getting it.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's just the way it is. And, All-Star games were like a lot of things in our lifetime, Peter, right? They've kind of changed. I mean, I remember All-Star game in sports, like in the 70s and 80s was kind of a big deal.
Well, I was at the 83 All-Star game at the Coliseum when Gretzky scored 4 goals in the third period. Yeah. And that's that kind of All-Star game that I grew up with. So I kind of like to see them go back to just a regular game. It is what it is. It's an All-Star game. We only have a couple of minutes left. Let me just close with this. Next week, NHL teams are back on the ice today, with the exception of the players at the Olympics. But next week, we're back to the NHL schedule. Really quick on all 3 area teams, what you look for in the second half from the Islanders, Rangers, and Devils.
Well, the Islanders are in position to make a push to make the playoffs. The whole franchise has changed with the arrival of Matthew Schaefer. He has been a brilliant player. He probably could have been on Team Canada's Olympic team. I mean, he's been that good of a player. So the Islanders are fun to watch right now. It's been a dramatic change over the last, calendar year. And so good for them. The Rangers have sent out another letter. They're trying to. Well, I mean, it's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
They made the conference finals in 2 out of the last 4 years, right? They were President's Trophy winners a couple of years ago. They didn't get all the way through. Now they've moved Panarin. They've moved some pieces around. I think they've got an uphill battle here. The interesting thing is they've got Igor Shesterkin, who may be the best goalie in the league. And so when you have a really good goalie and you still have an Adam Fox and you have some veteran players, can you retool, or do you have to totally rebuild, and do you have to move those guys? A lot on the plate there for Chris Drury. And then for the Devils, it's kind of been a similar story. It's kind of been messy. Jack Hughes has been hurt. He's healthy again. He's playing over there for Team USA in the Olympics. But the Devils, they've played themselves into a bad spot, and it's going to be a real challenge for them to make the playoffs.
No question about it. EJ Raddick, NHL Network. Thank you so much for always coming on the show. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the Olympics, and hopefully I'll see you at a rink somewhere soon.
You might just do that. So all the best to you, Peter. Always good to talk to you.
All right, thanks, EJ. EJ Raddick from NHL Network. Before we take a really quick break, first, what's hot at ticketbash.com. The Knicks host the Pistons Thursday night at the Garden. St. John's will host Creighton Saturday afternoon at the Garden. And the Yankees and Mets play their Grapefruit League openers on Saturday. We also just found out today, it was just announced a little while ago, Bruce Springsteen is going to play UBS Arena on May the 5th. So you want to stay tuned for that. Get the best seats at the best prices with no service fees at ticketbash.com. We're going to take a really quick break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by author Larry Schechter to talk about his book, The History of Fantasy Sports. But first, this word from the Embassy Diner. Hi, I'm Peter Schwartz.
And I'm Vinny Tickets.
We want to take a moment to talk about our fantastic sponsor, the Embassy Diner.
Embassy Diner has been a beloved staple in the restaurant industry for over 50 years. And the great thing about it is when you walk through the door, you're not a customer, you are family. Every visit promises to be filled with warmth, love, and respect.
And here's an extra treat. If you mention Sportsbash during your visit, you enjoy a free dessert on the Embassy Diner.
Come on down to the Embassy Diner, where great food and great company are always on the menu.
Visit the Embassy Diner, located at 4280 Hempstead Turnpike in Bethpage. Welcome back to Sports Bash, presented by TicketBash.com. I'm Peter Schwartz. We'll go back to your calls at 516-465-3990. Again, we thank EJ Raddick from the NHL Network for joining us in the last segment to talk about the Olympics and also the NHL as the season gets back underway next week. But with the baseball season getting underway, spring training has started, and I don't know if you're in a fantasy baseball league when your draft is. Do you wait till closer to the start of the season? Do you do your draft now? But fantasy sports has gotten so big, and fantasy baseball, I'm sure, if it's not number one, it's number two behind the NFL. And a great book is out called The History of Fantasy Sports. And the author of the book is on Zoom with us right now. He is Larry Schechter. Larry, it's Peter. Thank you for joining us today on Sports Bash.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us, and a great book about the history of fantasy sports. Can you, for my viewers, trace us back to the beginning of fantasy sports? How did this phenomenon all start? Was it as simple as going back to Stratomatic baseball, as my producer and I were talking about before? What are the origins of how fantasy sports got underway?
Well, games like Stratomatic were precursors to fantasy sports. And the distinction, for me, the distinction between things like Stratomatic and what I call modern fantasy sports is that games like Stratomatic were based on real professional athletes, but things that had already occurred in the past.
Right.
Like you play Stratomatic for what happened last year or 10 years ago, whereas modern fantasy sports, you're taking teams for events that haven't happened yet. So like right now, as you said, people are drafting baseball teams. We don't know what's going to happen yet. The season will unfold starting at the end of March.
So when you look at the history of fantasy sports, I mean, I remember, growing up, people were talking about, doing, rotisserie baseball. Like before it was called fantasy, it was called rotisserie. Let's do a draft and we'll have this league. How far back can you trace how like fantasy sports was called rotisserie before it took on the moniker of fantasy?
Well, I'll start with briefly with football. A guy named Bill Winkenbach, who was a 10% owner of the Oakland Raiders in the late 50s, he had a very primitive fantasy game for golf and for baseball. And he told a couple of people about this, and they said, this is great. Why don't we do this for football? And that's how the first fantasy football league started, which was in 1963. And fantasy football actually was spreading during the 60s and 70s because of this. And what you're referring to is Dan Okrent in 1980 started a game called rotisserie baseball. And Okrent is largely regarded as the person responsible for inventing fantasy baseball. A lot of people were playing kind of primitive games on their own, like Winkenbach and other people before then. But Okrent was in the media, and the people that he got into his first leagues were also in the media. And because of that, they got a lot of exposure. And people heard about the game, and it spread because of that. And they named it rotisserie baseball because when they got together to finalize the rules, they met at a Manhattan restaurant called La Rotisserie Française. And Okrent actually tried to monetize the game. They tried to copyright it and make money off of it, and that didn't go very well. The reason it didn't go well is because people quickly realized that there wasn't really anything you had to pay them for. The rules of the game were pretty straightforward and simple. And by simply changing the name from rotisserie to fantasy, they could play the game without having to pay them royalties.
Right.
So
Because when I think of rotisserie, I think of a chicken.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of it was because they met at that restaurant. It was also kind of like a play on the hot stove. You know, people talk about the off season for baseball being the hot stove league.
Right.
Yeah.
So now, as I mentioned before, players who play fantasy baseball are getting ready to, draft their teams. And I guess when you're putting together your fantasy team and you're getting ready for a draft, there's different ways to attack it. Just like in football, and my kids were big on fantasy football this year, and I would say, well, why aren't you taking the quarterback? And they're like, no, Dad, you got to take the running back because he's going to get you points catching passes and running and stuff like that. And I guess with baseball, it's probably the same thing. I mean, you could probably say, well, I'm going to draft Aaron Judge first overall because he has all those home runs, hits for a high average, and has all those RBIs. But then some people might say, oh, you want to get that pitcher first overall and make sure you get all the pitching numbers. When you're looking to put together a fantasy baseball team, what's the most important aspect in getting it started in the first couple of rounds?
Well, it's kind of what you're talking about. It doesn't mirror exactly to real baseball. Like, for example, in most fantasy baseball leagues, the stolen bases are weighted, very heavily compared to like ordinary baseball rules. That's why going back years ago, there was someone, the name escapes me off the top of my head, but somebody used to steal like 100 bases every year. He would go number one in fantasy baseball drafts because of the stolen bases. And, people would look at that and go, this isn't, very realistic. And they tried to create other games that were more, a little bit more realistic compared to real baseball.
Yeah, would that player have been Vince Coleman? Because Vince Coleman used to steal
Vince
out.
Coleman,
It was Vince Coleman, yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ricky Henderson's the other one, but Vince Coleman's the guy I was trying to think of.
Yeah, I wouldn't draft Vince Coleman first overall in anything at all, much less a baseball fantasy team.
The way that fantasy spread, it's quite interesting in a lot of ways. When I started to work on the book, I thought I was just going to write the history of fantasy sports, who did what, how did it all happen, because nobody's ever written a book like this and explained how it happened. But when I started getting into it and heard the stories of what people had done, a lot of them were very just fascinating, inspirational, a lot of funny stuff. And one thing is that the Winkenbach is the guy that started the first fantasy football league, but they kept it amongst themselves for the most part. But a guy named Andy Musolinas, who was in the first league, he's the guy who actually is responsible for spreading fantasy football because he owned a bar and he started to make it available to his patrons. And the thing about Musolinas is that's where it really caught on and really spread, was from him making it available. And the thing about Musolinas that's interesting is he was a World War II hero. When he was 17, Pearl Harbor happened, and he enlisted in the service, and he volunteered for a unit where they said, you're going to go behind enemy lines. 97% of you are not going to return alive. He did it anyway. Obviously, he survived, one of the few that survived. And when he was 90 years old, he went to Washington to receive a Congressional Medal of Honor.
Larry Schechter is my guest. He's the author of The History of Fantasy Sports. And, obviously when you're in a fantasy league, there's a cost for the most part. I mean, there's some online fantasy leagues that kids play that you're playing for tokens, or you're not playing for anything. You're just playing for bragging rights of winning. But for most people, it's always been historically, whether it's $25 or $50 or $100 or God knows even more than that, people will put their team into a fantasy league. But now, the fantasy sports, Larry, has gotten so big that it's kind of helped sprout the whole gambling aspect of sports, making it legal. Are you concerned that too many people are starting to lump fantasy sports as it was intended to be now in with legalized sports gambling? Because there is a connection now between the two.
Yeah, there absolutely is a connection between the two, and my book goes back. It covers everything from the precursors of fantasy sports to the invention and spread of fantasy football and fantasy baseball and other sports, newspaper games, the first publications, and just everything through more modern day things like daily fantasy sports is what you're referring to.
Right.
That's really kind of crossing the line between gambling and fantasy sports. And there's a whole long legal situation too, like going back to the very beginning, the league I was just talking about with Mussolinis and his bar. They had money involved, but they called it points rather than cents. Like they had like a 5 cent league, for example. Yeah. Every time you got a point, everybody else in the league had to give you 5 cents. But they called it points because they were afraid maybe one day the Vice Squad would bust in and arrest them for games. And this was always a concern in the fantasy industry, and there were a couple of cases where actually in later years the Vice Squad did arrest people in Fort Lauderdale. Some people were arrested in Austin, Texas. Some people were arrested for their fantasy league, calling it gambling. And it was a whole big legal thing until finally most of the states determined that fantasy is legal. And then they determined that the daily fantasy was legal, which is why DraftKings and FanDuel and all these other things popped up.
Larry, thank you so much for joining me here on the show. The book is The History of Fantasy Sports. Larry Schechter has been my guest. Larry, thanks again for joining me here on the show. Best of luck with the book, and hope we'll talk again on the show somewhere down the road.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Awesome. Larry Schechter, the author of The History of Fantasy Sports. It is time now for the Coach's Collectibles Item of the Week, and I love this one. Usually when we have these med items, it perks up the interest of Tony. But when it's an Islander item, it perks up my interest. And of course, it's this great Brian Trottier autographed jersey from Coach's Collectibles, and we have a picture of Brian signing it. And a picture of the jersey itself. And it's a great, great item. Coach's Collectibles, your number one source for 100% authentic sports memorabilia and live public autograph events. Check out Coach's Collectibles online at www.coachescollectiblesny.com. And please use the code SPORTSBASH to get free shipping on all of your orders. Have to sneak in a couple of things here before the end of the show. I may have to have Tony put the meter on for a couple of minutes of overtime, but I got to get to both of these things. First of all, some really sad news here on Long Island yesterday. No, it's not Dad's time to brag just yet.
That's right. Thought you were going. Sorry.
But it wouldn't have been sad.
Well, that's why.
That's why sad.
I froze.
Oh my God. No. I told you we were going to stick something in there between the two of them.
You did.
All right.
Sorry.
Let's start that again. Some really sad news here on Long Island yesterday, and I didn't see it first. My wife saw it first and immediately texted me a screenshot. But the last remaining Hooters on Long Island abruptly closed yesterday. It was the Hooters of Farmingdale. And, in the past, there was a Hooters in East Meadow and there was a Hooters in Islandia. But the last one to stand was the Hooters in Farmingdale. And we were just there as a family a few weeks ago. And if you follow me on social, you know that I try to make light of going, that I was getting some early early voting for Father of the Year. But it was the four of us have always enjoyed going to Hooters. The chicken wings are great. And the fact that this happened out of nowhere was really sad. And you wonder what exactly happened. Because we were in there a few weeks ago. The place was pretty well filled. And unfortunately, there are now no more Hooters on Long Island. And, maybe some entrepreneur or someone, restaurateur, whatever it is, what I call somebody who opens up a restaurant, will try and find the way to bring Hooters back to Long Island at some point. But I want to tell a really quick story about Hooters in East Meadow from years ago, and I have to end this particular segment with this. So my older son Bradley was, I don't even think he was 3 years old. Was he 2, 3? My wife would remember exactly because I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. But Bradley was very, very young. He was like 3, maybe even 3. I don't even know if he was 3 years old. But I took him to Hooters for the first time. Obviously now, 17, 18 years ago, whatever it was. And he liked, chicken fingers and, buffalo wings. So I'm like, I'm going to take, little Bradley to Hooters for the first time. So we sit down and, the waitress comes over in all of her glory. And so we order the food and, Bradley is chowing down on it and everything like that. We're having a grand old time. And then the waitress comes back to see if we need refills. I said yes. And she says, how's everything going, young man? And Bradley looks up at this Hooters waitress with a big smile on his face, ear to ear. And he said, excuse me, how come you're not wearing any pants? I says, 3 years old, 2 years old. How come you're not wearing any pants? I felt so bad for this girl. I started cracking up, and she turned beet red, and as if she had to justify her outfit, said, "They're shorts." Look at this Bradley. He was a wise ass back then. He's a wise ass now. How come you're not wearing any pants? But goodbye to Hooters on Long Island. Hopefully, it comes back at some point. And now it is time for Dad's time to brag.
Well, you were kind of bragging at the Bradley story. So
Yes, but my point was that, Tony, I said there was sad news on Long Island. Now, do you think that I would say there's sad news on Long Island and transition right into Dad's time to brag? I mean, if Diane was here, she'd smack you in the face right now.
True.
Yes, absolutely. Diane Fogarty, who's Tony's co-host on Tuesdays on the Knock 'em Dead comedy show. But now it is time for Dad's time to brag. Not that I wouldn't brag about Bradley, what he said in Hooters, but this is a totally different story. What a week for my son Jared, my younger son Jared. It started on Saturday. He had 2 goals for his hockey team, the LI Sound. He also had an assist in a game on Sunday afternoon. We're looking at the video of his second goal. And the reason why you're not seeing a video of the first goal is because Dad was asleep at the wheel and didn't realize that Jared was back on the rink, so I was not rolling video on the first goal, but it was a beautiful deflection in front of the goal. But you saw the second one, the perseverance, whacking at the ball right in front of the goalie, knocked it in. And I think both goals were less than a minute apart. So that was really, nice. And we started to think about if he was going to get the hat trick. The only hat I had with me was my ski hat. So the question then was going to become, if he got the hat trick, should I have thrown the hat onto the rink? And I think I would have done it. But we didn't get to that point. But 2 goals was fantastic. And then he got assist on Sunday. And then on Sunday night, Jared and my wife Cheryl bowl as a team in a bowling league at Levittown Lanes on Sunday nights. And Jared has been getting so good at bowling. He's on the bowling team at MacArthur High School. He was on the bowling team at Sauk Middle School. And he had the game of his life on Sunday night, a career high 288 in a league game. 288. And here's how great he was that night. He had 10 straight strikes to start the game. So you get to the 10th frame, he gets the first strike. Now you got to get 2 more strikes to complete the perfect game. You got a 9 to end with a 288. So incredibly proud, my wife and I are, of Jared and how great. And I hope, now they're off from school this week, so he's not going to see the bowling teacher until they get back next Monday. But I would say, Jared, if you're watching the show, and I hope you are, because you're not in school, you need to send the screenshot. We just saw the picture of the scoreboard you need to send that to Coach Nessler because he needs to know how good you got this year. And I think Jared will make a push for the varsity team next year. 288, if you consistently do. I'm lucky if I can get an 88. Like when I go bowling, I need the bumpers. I need the bumpers to go bowling. Tony, do you need the bumpers when you go bowling, or you?
I need the bumpers in every aspect of my life.
That wasn't intended to be cruel. I was just trying to make light of the fact that I'm a crappy bowler. But yeah, unbelievable, and hopefully the 2 in front of the score becomes the norm and not the exception. But Jared has really become an outstanding bowler. And PBA Bowling Tour somewhere down the road. Let's see if that materializes somewhere down the road. We got another great show coming up on Thursday. I don't know who the guests are yet. We haven't finalized everything, but we will have a great show. You know, the franchise tag in the NFL, the window opened up today, so we're going to see if the Jets tag Breece Hall. So I'm going to kind of wait until tomorrow to book the guests and see what happens with the Jets and the Giants for the franchise window, but we'll probably talk a little football on the show on Thursday, so stay tuned for that. We do want to tell you we were supposed to have Islanders MSG Network's host and reporter Shannon Hogan on the show today. We had it booked last week, but we had the scheduling change happen, so we are going to have Shannon on the show on Tuesday, March 10th. The Islanders are going to be in St. Louis that night. She will not be there because that is a nationally televised game. So she is going to join us on Tuesday, March 10th. Always great to talk Islanders hockey with Shannon Hogan. And there's an Islanders community event that she's going to be involved with that we're going to talk about on the show that day as well. And that will do it for today's edition of Sports Bash, presented by TicketBash.com and Ryan Anthony's Heating and Air Conditioning Service. Thanks to my guests EJ Raddick and Larry Schechter. Thanks to Tony Walker and everyone here at Governors. Thanks to our social media coordinator, Leanne Burgess. Sports Bash is sponsored by the Embassy Diner in Bethpage, Coach's Collectibles, and by the Marty Lyons Foundation. Thanks to everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed the show today. We are back on Thursday at 1 o'clock. Have a great day, everyone.